Welcome to False Flag, the podcast made to cut through the propaganda and doublespeak and empower a grassroots activism, and most importantly, to take back a government of and for the people.
All right, so here we are talking about today's subject is the power of grassroots movement. I'll be talking about the work that I did with the National Bernie campaign last year. You'll be talking about
Occupy.
and you'll be talking about
The Philhut.
Hitler.
Early Nazi Germany and how this is it's kind of all playing out again.
So let's start with you because, the first time I met you, I remember going to the bathroom. Some friends of mine invited me over to your house, and I went to the bathroom, and goddamn, you had like a 600-page novel of no fucking pictures, just text on Hitler in the bathroom, and I was like, this is not a normal bathroom novelty book. And I was like, what the fuck have I walked into? And the more I got to know you, I really applaud and am drawn to the knowledge of the history that you have studied, because you bring something that was so destructive to a country and the steps that they took to do that. And you're able to talk about how that same shit is happening today. So let's just dig into it. Talk about the history.
Well, when Hitler was running for a leadership role over there, they thought he was just a crazy guy with weird hair. Do I need to say more? No. Hitler was very much an outside left field character that nobody took him seriously. They thought that his rallies were just a bunch of violent yahoos, that he had no government experience whatsoever. None. And his platform was make Germany great again.
He had a great hairstyle too.
Yeah, they made fun of his hair. Yeah, and the little pencil and the little mustache and all that.
This all sounds way too familiar.
Yeah. He had a younger wife or younger mistress.
Sounds familiar. I can't connect the dots yet.
No, his big thing was, from the Treaty of Versailles, Germany took such a hit after the war. I mean, we can't even, in our modern times, we really can't appreciate how bad things went after 1918. One thing I can go into the reasons how it happened, but let's just, for sake of brevity, let's go just back that it happened. You had a thing called hyperinflation, where we used to have inflation like every couple months. You pay more for Snickers, or actually you don't pay more for Snickers. They just get smaller and smaller and smaller.
Prior to 1918, when I was in college, I had an art minor, and I studied exclusively the German expressions.
Yes.
And you had a group of artists, both writers, musicians, and artists of all types, that would get together for coffee. You had the Free Society, you had the Dresden Society, and these artists came together and talked about the social ills of Germany at the time. And then they would go out to their own work and take these ideas and try to convey it to the people and say, look at where we're going. So this is pre-Hitler, But the German expressionists really were keying in on the social ills. And one of the artists I studied was Kathy Coolidge, who did a beautiful piece that I have tattooed on my arm that's Never Again War. And she has this beautiful charcoal of a mother in an apron and little kids poking out under the apron, and she's kind of protecting them with her arms. And it was seed corn must not be planted. That she was even aware that even if Germany was winning the war prior to 1918, it was at the cost of the young people, which was the future of Germany, that were fucking dying.
Yeah.
So all this was going on in a turbulent time. People were trying to wrestle in Germany with what's right, what's wrong, where are we going, what's happening.
I'm going to tie into that. Like, with Obama, you had, I remember the uproar when Obama put the White House in rainbow colors. I remember how everyone just lost it over Bruce Jenner. I say Bruce Jenner because he's still a guy. I'll edit that out. Yeah, everybody lost it over, the Jenner thing. And you have a large section of our populace right now. They're not getting the American dream. They're not doing better than their parents. And the American dream is not about getting a house and 2.6 kids. It's doing better than your parents did. The sacrifices they made to keep you alive to this point was worth it. So you have people just generally losing wealth. And then coupled with the 2007 real estate crash, things started, for a large portion of the population, things are going very, very bad. Well, humans love to find reasons for that. And you were talking about the
German expression.
The German expressionism. And, the Cuban movement, Picasso was real popular back at that time period. And everything just fell apart after 1918 with the reparations of hyperinflation. When everything fell apart here, people looked for reasons. And at the same time, you had immigration coming in, you had the transgendered movement, you had the same, the multi-sex bathrooms. Well, that's the reason everything's going wrong. It says it right there in the Bible, it's riverboat gambling, that's the reason. People love bumper sticker solutions. They love it. They love jingoism.
Yeah. A friend of mine had a great idea for a bumper sticker about 20 years ago. When did your religion become my government?
Well, but then here comes Hitler. Hitler famously said that anybody that paints the sky green and the grass blue should be shot. You look at the official Nazi art after Hitler came to power, it was nothing but just stiff, realistic, stiff, very patriotic, very like soldiers getting dragged back to the front, mothers holding their babies, very patriotic. But it was backlash against the people with, Picasso would see both eyes on the same side of his face and stuff like that.
Yeah, the German expressionists that had worldwide acceptance from other artists and being revered and were able to get shows in Germany. After Hitler took power, goddamn, they were shut down.
A little known fact, though, is actually like Hermann Goering, who was quite their art aficionado. He saw it coming. So he bought up a tremendous amount of the alternative art, and then after Hitler basically outlawed everything, he was started selling off to collectors because it was suddenly, it's a thing to own, and it shot the market up.
Yeah, and when the Nazis were looking at worldwide globalization, which aspirin company did they buy into? Bayer Aspirin. Yeah. I mean, I get it. The industrial military complex, no matter which country you're in, their goal is to amass the wealth to take over the world. And every country does that. If you think America's not planning to do that, look at France, with Napoleon. Look at what he tried to do. Let's go look at history with Constantine. Look at the Roman Empire. Look at the Moors. I mean, God, wake up, people.
What are they called? Hegemony? Is that right? Hegemony? That's where you want to control everything? You want to own the footballs this way?
Pinky and the brain. What are we going to do? Same thing we do every night.
Well, I read this really good book called The Lucifer Principle, and it kind of made the point of like we are just simply vessels for our genes, and that we have the human race, and well, if you look at ideals as viruses that infect brains and then pass it on, and if you look at the United States or Russia or whatever as organisms as opposed to countries, well, we live on a small little chunk of rock. There's only so much resources. There's only so many minds available. And we spend all our time trying to squeeze the other ones out.
Sure.
It's like Darwin said about there's only so many pieces of pie, and by sliding one in, you're pushing somebody else out.
Let's get back to Hitler, though, because I remember in my teenage years coming across a book that was smuggled out of Germany during the war. And it was in German, and it was printed in Germany. It was a German propaganda book, but it showed Hitler smiling, holding babies. Let's talk about how did this person come out of nowhere and start this grassroots movement?
Well, I'll tell you one, you brought up an important thing there. Hitler invented the photo op. He was the first one that really got it. Radio back then was just coming online. It was their version of the internet. Before, you had to have bands come to your area to hear music. If somebody gave a political speech, you had to be in the hall with them. And here comes radio. Radio is extremely cheap to get your message out. One thing that Hitler really pushed is, the media doesn't tell you the truth about what I'm saying. I'm going to talk directly to you.
He gave away radios with one channel.
Yes, they were specially made to only pick up radio stations in Germany. They couldn't pick up anything else.
Yeah.
So he controlled media.
Yeah, it's kind of
what did he do with journalists?
What did they call that? Twitter back then? Well, you just talk directly to supporters without going through the see what's the Jugendpresse? No, that's
he had more likes than Justin Bieber has ever got.
Yeah.
So how did he control media? I mean, he actually shut down media.
He actually had his thugs go in there and bust the presses up and arrest the reporters. That's how he did it. I mean, one thing that was really interesting is when the Nazis were first forming, they formed a SA, which was like a kind of a companion to the police. They were they weren't volunteer. They were slightly paid Nazis that worked along the police to maintain order, like almost like I hate to say use the word private army. That's not quite right, but they were an auxiliary police unit, and that was run by the Rome character, and which is one of Hitler's first cohorts or whatever. And then Hitler had a private bodyguard detail called the SS. The SS were extremely loyal Nazis. They paid them well. They swore allegiance to Hitler, not Germany, but to Hitler. Well, as Hitler's star rose, what he would have the SA go out and start fights with the communists, and he would bust communist meetings up, beat people up. Well, when they'd go out, they wouldn't always be dressed in uniform, and you have businesses getting broken, you have just chaos in the streets. Well, Hitler went on like, hey, you know what? You let me, I'll stop this crap. I'll stop all this mindless violence in the street. I will fund the police.
And how did he get the
Does that sound familiar?
How did he get the young millennials on board?
He paid them.
But look at what he did with
No.
camps.
There was. I'm sorry. That makes it way too simple. No, it was not a. Hitler started.
But how did he come up with all these ideas? I mean, you said he was not a politician, so where the hell was he getting his information?
First of all, Hitler was not insane. He was not crazy. He was just abnormal. He was a person who had extreme talent in a very, very narrow bandwidth. He believed that if you had the youth, you had the future. And that because of that, he started a thing called the Hitler Youth, Hitler, Jugend, you know, I'll let that out. Anyway, he started the Hitler Youth, and one thing they did is it took people away from their families. It got them indoctrinated into the whole Nazi mindset. It took them out. They went out and they drilled like a military unit. They taught them how to shoot. They taught them how to fly gliders. And they're also little spies that if the parents would speak out against Hitler, well, there'd be a knock at your door. Herr Grubels, I heard that you have some bad words about our leader.
Word you're looking for is Hitler Jugend.
Yeah.
J-U-G-E-N-D.
Yeah, because youth and Jew almost Juden is Jew and Jugend is youth.
Yeah, HJ. It was abbreviated. It was a Nazi party in Germany with the origins dating back to 1922.
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. In the very beginning of Hitler's grassroots movement, it was more about nationalism and pride in being German.
Yes.
It had nothing to do with the Jews at that point.
Yes and no. The Jews are the bogeymans. That Hitler was brilliant in the fact that he convinced the entire population that the Jews were not only these absolutely just insects or bacillus, like a virus on the German people. They're the people down that they're the low life traders that are that cost you when you're walking down the road. They're always his big thing is like Jews produce nothing.
They lost the war.
They lost the war.
And
yes.
Caused the hyperinflation.
Yeah, they caused the hyperinflation. Yes.
Okay, so
I'm going to hyperinflation in a moment too.
Okay, but I find that interesting because to bring that forward to the Trump administration, the boogeyman are the Muslims and the transgender people.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that funny? A lot of what Trump's doing mimics Hitler's rise to power.
It's making the Americans, instead of a melting pot, you're having them, an outgroup.
And he played upon that. How long have you studied the history of Germany and Hitler's rise to power?
He's about 9 years old.
Okay.
Literally, I've tens of thousands of stuff.
How did that happen? I mean, did you just wake up one day and said, I want to research Hitler?
Actually, when I was growing up, you had a lot more free time. No internet, no TV. And I read the World Book Encyclopedias, all of them. And I remember going through the H's, and I come across this little guy, Adolf Hitler, that he killed, responsible for, inadvertently killed 55 million people, 6 million Jews, and other things. And the first thing I thought was like, wow, he was a busy guy. Because, a 9-year-old kid, it's like, well, he went out there and knocked everybody in the head. But, I grew up with Hogan's Heroes. Remember, like, their version of Nazis? Yeah. I mean, they were cute. There was never, the concentration camp in Hogan Heroes was a fun place to be.
Yeah, in fact, the commandant was actually a Jewish descent. And he enjoyed playing the buffoon, because it was his way to jab back to the Germans. I found that interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand a 9-year-old saying, but I think back on me at 9 and what I was into and where I am today. I haven't been a lifelong student of that, so there was something there that interested me.
Well, you're doing yourself a horrible disservice if you look at Hitler as crazy, because he wasn't. That's the best thing I come across is that don't look at him like an extreme version of humanity. He's not as far out there as you think.
Why is that so important?
Because it can happen today.
Because so many people want to pin that title on him. and stay away from.
And so it's unique and it can't happen again.
It's unique and can't happen again. But if you'll notice, Hitler was really kind of a slacker. That's a really good way to describe him.
Well, he was an artist, but he wasn't a good one.
He had more talent than people.
He went to art school.
No, that's the problem. If he went to art school, it'd be a different history. But
I thought he did.
No, he applied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you take the boogeyman and you decriminalize him and you begin to see patterns. And let's just face it, if you are a student of history, history does repeat itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you were driven to understand how this took place so that it wouldn't happen in your lifetime?
Well, one thing that Hitler was so close to seizing power, but he had a what was the guy his World War I hero?
The Air Force guy? Goering.
No, Germany.
Yes.
No.
I
always blank on this guy. He's like the main character. The Kaiser.
No, it wasn't Kaiser. It was Bismarck.
Bismarck. Every time I go blank on that. Okay.
Bismarck.
Yes.
And he was even before World War I. He was back in the 1800s.
Yes.
Otto von Bismarck.
Okay. Well, he ran against Bismarck and lost. And the industrialists, they saw in Hitler the ability. He saw him as a powerful leader, but they thought not powerful, a powerful speaker that could arouse emotion. But they saw him as a buffoon. He had no government experience, and the industrials at the time, they put money behind him because they looked at him like a puppet. We can get this guy in office. We can tell him what to do. In fact, Poppin.
Enter capitalists entering politics.
Something like that.
But Poppin, which later became an ambassador Enter Poppin, which is a big, kind of like a Mitch McConnell of today. He famously said that, yeah, we'll get Hitler in, and within 2 months we'll have him squeaking when he walks. That we're going to have such a tight grip on this guy, he will be our puppet, and we're going to run with it.
So how did Hitler not fall into that?
Okay, when he come in, when he came into power, he played it soft for about 6 months. He just kissed babies and opened factories and started the Audubon. But the biggest thing he did, he started massively spending on government infrastructure projects and boosting the military. And that put so many people to work. He went from like 55% unemployment down to 5%, literally in like 6 to 8 months. I mean, it was just like, and everybody that thought he was a stupid buffoon hothead, my God, I'm working now. He's doing something right.
So
then,
but if Trump puts $64 billion into the industrial military complex, we're going to be working again.
And $1 trillion.
Boy, that sounds all too familiar.
Yeah, but this was mostly civil projects. There was some military buildup too, but most of the money went to civil projects.
Remember, he's been put $1 trillion into building bridges and stuff. The difference now is we have very, very low unemployment right now. And you remember in the speech you gave the other night, you said like 94 million people or 84 million people are out of work.
I didn't hear it.
Well, okay, that's including people who are retired, kids that are over 12 but under 18. I mean, it's always if that was actually the case, our unemployment rate would be like 50%. So he's screwing the numbers, but.
Okay, but let's go back to Hitler.
But this is what happened. This is how Hitler seized power. Just being elected, he was still constrained by Parliament, the Reichstag. The Nazis had been losing; they'd been winning elections but losing seats. The people who supported him more, but as a percentage of the parliament, it was dropping every election cycle. The communists were rising. So what he did, first they thought it was just a clever, twist of history or whatever. But looking back at it, they're 99% sure that Hermann Goering burnt the Reichstag, and that there was the guy that the drifter, Jewish drifter, that they executed for it. I mean, he was actually doing it. He actually was starting the fire, but they took full advantage of it. They helped him start the fire or whatever.
They paid him.
Yeah. What? Something. Yeah. There's actually a tunnel from where Goering was staying to the Reichstag.
Yeah, so they found the stooge and created a false flag.
Okay. Yeah, false flag. Okay, so now the Reichstag's burning. The Capitol's burning. My God, it's the communists! The communists have done this. He goes out and arrests like 700 people in one night. Oh my God, the trials, the show trial. That's where the concentration camp started. That we're going to put all these communists, we're going to pull them out of society until we figure out what's happening. The brown shirts stopped busting everything up. Okay, we pulled communists out. My God, things are more peaceful. But more importantly, remember I told you the communists were gaining in power in the Congress? He outlawed the Communist Party. So now the Nazis went from a small little, minority party to a majority party. Overnight. Now that you're majority party, then they start pushing through the Enabling Act, which said that gives Hitler all these broad-ranging powers. Executive privilege, yeah. So within like 8 months, you couldn't get rid of them unless a bullet. And of course, you had all the industrialists who are making money hand over fist now. They don't want to rock the boat. It's equivalent to what they call the Trump thing in the stock market right now. The stock market was well on its way, but after Trump came in, it went up 16%.
But how did your average German citizen not see what was going on?
I get it.
And remain.
They weren't killing people yet.
And
they were employing people.
And you literally changed everything. Like a 50% unemployment rate is pretty freaking hard.
So if you're reading the government paper and the government radio is talking about the evil communists are now gathered up and there's peace and you're working and there's money.
And anybody who's any alternate voices, they shut them down. And the priesthood, they started busting them for pedophilia and corruption. And so the Catholics that stayed had to do the party line. And so when they started rounding up.
So Lutherans at that time in Germany weren't pedophiles, just the Catholic priests.
It was the Catholics that were getting the thing. But that's hard to disprove. And so, there are all these corruption things. They made it very. They made it very obvious that if you're a priest and you start going against the government, you get a knock on your door, and guess what? You are in the concentration camps. Now, at first, the concentration camps.
And who was that? Bonhoeffer.
Well, this is one of them. Okay, now the early concentration camps
weren't bad.
They weren't bad.
Yeah.
No, they took.
They were detention centers.
They fed them. They had them go out and do exercise in the morning. They played games. And after about 3 or 4 months, I was like, have you learned your lesson?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Go back to society. We'll leave you alone.
It's very innocuous.
Very innocuous, yes. Yeah. Very innocuous. I read that KH book about concentration. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, my God. But yeah, look, baby steps. Baby steps.
Baby steps. So the concentration camps, and Trump is wanting to increase private prisons.
Well.
Wow.
Okay, no. Think about this, though. Think about this. Okay. There's something like 11 million undocumented illegal aliens in the United States right now. Okay. Our prison capacity is something like 1.5 million, and that's if we let everybody loose tomorrow. So if you start rounding up all these people, where are you going to put them? How are you going to process them?
Got to have some room.
And what about due process? Because does due process cover an illegal alien?
Well, we've already, decided that wasn't necessary back with the Patriot Act. got rid of due process.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right.
All the president has to do is by executive mandate say you're a terrorist and Constitution goes
There's
away.
a really good Wikipedia article on this. Okay, remember when Bush suspended habeas corpus? Show me the body.
Yeah.
That was always a big deal. Like, I can't believe we're doing this. Can't believe we're doing this. Well, they reinstated it, but they changed it.
Right.
So, yeah, habeas corpus is on the books now, but there's a really good.
There's a way to get around it.
It's gutless.
Yeah, it's not the old one.
No, it's completely gutless. If you go to the Wikipedia article, I'm not a legal person, so I'm not even going to. I'm just going to butcher. I recommend you going to that and reading it because it's terrifying.
Okay, according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS, 2,220,300 adults were incarcerated in the U.S. federal and state prisons and county jails in 2013.
Okay.
About 0.91% of adults, 1 in 110. Additionally, 4 million, double, 751,400 adults in 2013, 1 in 51, were on probation or parole. And those numbers have only gone up more and more and more.
Yes.
But, I mean, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in America. So, why would Trump be wanting to increase private prisons?
Well, okay, right there. Okay, going back to the capitalist thing. Okay, if you have a state prison, states are Oklahoma. Okay, Oklahoma's paying for all the prisons. They have a vested interest to not have people on the books because it takes money away from rebuilding the Capitol. We're in Oklahoma right now. Our schools can't keep all the lights on, but we're redoing the Capitol. I love it. But if you have a private prison system, they have all the incentive in the world to get more people in prison. And then when you get them out of prison, you've got ankle bracelets that pay a subscription fee for. You've got parole officers that get they're customers.
I realize that. But the point I'm trying to make is, if we go back in history repeats itself. We look at how Hitler came to power, that he was a buffoon. People thought they could control him. The same thing's going on with Trump. His administration are more dark and dirty than
I would say administration. I think Trump is an idiot. I really do.
I don't think you're going to hear any arguments here or with the majority of Americans on that. But to say we're going to rescind Obama's order to decrease private prisons and we're going to start using them, that's what Hitler did with the concentration camp. We're already moving towards pointing the finger at Muslims, at LGBTQ people. History does repeat itself, and people are going to be complacent. Do you think that the coal miners that voted for Trump, if he goes in and says, you're not going to do coal, but we're opening up a new military plant, we'll give you a job there.
Damn right.
They're going to love him. They're going to be eating. They'll be taking vacations, and they don't care about the private prisons. But let's look at the long-term effect. What is really going on? There are so many false flags going on in the Trump administration that the progressives are going, whoa, wait a minute, But before we get into all that, let's just kind of go back on Hitler, and then I want to move off to the Occupy. So he came to power, he got rid of his enemies, he took over the Legislative Bureau, he became the supreme leader, and how did it get out of hand from there?
He didn't take Stalingrad militarily. That's how it got out of hand.
That's when everything turned. Because everything was a success up to that point.
Elaborate on that.
How many divisions were there? Two?
Oh, God, I don't know.
Like 250,000 soldiers?
500,000, maybe, I don't know.
Well,
lots. There were lots.
Okay, when in 1940, okay, he started the Battle of Britain in 1940. They had almost won, but they didn't realize it. They stopped. They stopped having an active war with England. But that's not entirely true. Not active war, but they scaled it back. They took most of the fighter stuff, sent it to the Russian border. His reasoning was, our blitzkrieg tactics are unstoppable. That Russia had went through. Stalin had all these purges. A few years before that, Russia tried to take over Norway and just got their butt handed to them. And Norway was a tiny little country with no military whatsoever. He thought that he said the quote was, the house is already rotten, all we do is kick the door down. So his reasoning was, he believed that Churchill was trying to ally with Stalin. Stalin had entered a non-aggression pact with Hitler, and they'd split Poland up over it. So he was thinking, if I go in there, knock the head off Russia, I've got all this tremendous mines, fuel. At this point, he was getting something like 80% of all his fuel off Russia, fuel and oil. Let's avoid the middleman. Let's go straight to him. But he thought if he could destroy Russia, England would have no choice but see the writing on the wall. And Hitler did not want to go to war with England. He wanted to go in a partnership with England. He greatly admired England. In his mind, Germany would control Europe, land part, and they would enter an agreement where Germany would control Europe and trade with England, and England would keep the sea lanes open, and they'd become super wealthy.
Their empire. They had
an empire. They had an empire. He loved England. There were these people. So he masses these troops up at Russia, starts tremendous success. I mean, kills something like it's like 80% of the Air Force in the first day. Caught them on the ground. I mean, like just obliterate them. I mean, just a steamroller. Yeah. But they had unusually heavy rains that spring, and a tank, particularly a German tank, was not known for its fuel efficiency. So now you're going through 3 foot of mud or 2 foot of mud. Your thing grinds to a halt. It takes a lot more fuel. There's a thing like the logistics. If you've got a long snake, it doesn't matter what the head's doing if you can't keep things getting fed to it. Everything from socks to fuel to underwear, whatever. You have to keep these lines open. Well, he pours through Russia. Then I think it was Goebbels had the brilliant idea of setting up these. It was Himmler and Goebbels. They had the brilliant idea of setting up a thing called Einsatzgruppen, which are special groups. They wanted to go in and kill all the Jews. They hated the Jews, especially Bolshevik Jews. They were. If we let these people live, they're going to migrate into Russia, into Germany, and we're going to have the same thing of World War I, where you have the communist Jews stabbing us in the back, destroying our infrastructure, and we're going to lose this war. So the military's pushing forward to Russia. Einsatzgruppen come in behind them, starts rounding up all the males in every town they see. They take them out, have them dig ditches, boom. Most things about the Holocaust, there were gas chambers, obviously, and there were death camps. But almost all the killing of the Jews happened early on in the war. The United States knew about it. Earlier in the war, and it was mass shootings. As you can guess, coming into a town and killing the people does not get you on a Christmas card list. So as this word spread, you had all the males going rogue and going out into the wilderness, blowing up train tracks, shooting convoy operators, blowing up trucks. Well, since Germany wasn't a member of the Geneva Convention, it wasn't unusual for them to round up more people and shoot them. It was a self-feeding loop. And so you had this great spear going into Russia while somebody's sawing the shaft of the thing. So they get to Stalingrad. There's also a reason he goes to Czechoslovakia, which knocks his whole plane back 1 month, which gets him to the thing of where winter comes in, and it was a terrible winter. But they slug it out. You know, they don't retreat. Same thing happened next year. Unusual rains, harsh winter. They get almost to Stalingrad. I mean, they get almost to Russia, and he splits his forces. He has one go to Stalingrad because he wants the political thing of Stalingrad, named after him. And he goes, what's the other one he goes to?
Toward Moscow, but it starts with a G, I think.
Yeah, he splits his forces, in other words.
One of them went to Moscow's north and Stalingrad south.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting way off the tangent. Yeah. What it boils down to is he overextends his forces. There are something like 2 or 3 divisions stuck right outside of Stalingrad, but they don't have the man, material, or fuel to go ahead and push through. So they essentially decide to, the Russian army is defeated. It's just a matter of time. We're going to basically hold out here until spring comes, get more reserves. Well, during that time, Russia has recruited all sorts of soldiers. There's a tank farm, there's a tank factory in Stalingrad that's pushing out tanks 24 hours a day. Which, at this point, the Germans are still doing 9-to-5 war fighting. They don't go overtime on their factories at home. So, Russia's putting out all sorts of material, men and material. They circle around. They do a pincher movement where they isolate this group, like a pincher, bear hugging them. No food can get in. Then they just start piecing them off. Long story short, Germany loses like 250,000 trained, experienced soldiers, which is a tremendous amount of people to lose if you're Germany. Now, there's nothing stopping Germany from rolling into, there's nothing stopping Russia from rolling into Germany. Now, Germany goes from an offensive war to a strictly defensive war.
And things change. Policy changes.
Yes. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you start hearing, people come back and they're like, this is bad. This is really bad. And now the fact that you have Russia, who's not defeated, they're very angry at you. They're coming for you now. And that's where it all starts falling apart.
Okay. Let's go back to part of the resistance from the Jewish youth males.
Mm-hmm.
And take
Russia, though, was everybody.
But
God bless them.
Take that resistance and segue into the resistance that the
Occupy movement?
Yeah.
That was Occupy movement was a strange thing. A lot of people thought it was a complete failure. And I don't. I think it was a complete success. I believe that all the grassroots movements that we're doing today has a direct correlation to what happened during the Occupy movement. Of course, the original name was Occupy Wall Street. And it was it was after the crash and TARP and all that, where a lot of people, before that, back when I became aware, when I was a young man and became aware of how things really were, I would start having a conversation about economy or government or something like that, politics with somebody, and one of the first things I would do is I'd play dumb and I would ask them to explain to me how the Federal Reserve worked, what it was, how it worked. And I can tell you that 95% of the people back then would tell me, well, that's the arm of the government that controls the interest rates in the banks. So when that didn't work, and so I knew that there was a whale of an amount of ignorance about what was going on in our government and the economy in this country.
What is the role?
Well, to make money. They're bankers.
Yes.
It's just that simple. They're bankers. They make money. They are globalist bankers, not United States bankers. They don't care where the money comes from.
Yes.
As long as they get it.
Sure. Just like recently, Bank of America getting in trouble for their teller setting up new accounts.
No, that was Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo.
And Wells Fargo had another thing just a year ago. They were heavily involved in that. What was it?
The mortgages?
Yeah, the mortgages. Yeah, they had some sneaky stuff in mortgages too.
Oh, the MERS, MER. I forgot what the acronym stands. MER. It's like automatic title transfer, where the law in every state is that when you transfer ownership of some real estate, there has to be somebody down at the courthouse getting a stamp and all this stuff. No, they just did away with all that.
Yeah. Okay, but let's get back to.
Okay, so anyway, so the name of this thing is Occupy Wall Street. And what happened was when the economic collapse in 2008 happened, and before then, a lot of people were completely ignorant about how things worked in this country. Who controls the government and politics? I believed it was international bankers, but not everybody believed that. But when the economy collapsed and they were talking about, well, we might have to do TARP in the legislature, up there in Washington, it turns out that there was actually at first some actual debate and opposition to this bailout, to the banks bailing out. And that lasted for about a week. And then, the head of the Federal Reserve comes and has some private meetings with the legislatures, behind closed doors, and he informs them quite plainly that if you don't give us this money and bail us out, taxpayers' money, and bail out our private banking system that failed on our investments, that there will be martial law, riots in the street, the economy will collapse, and it will lead to martial law.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's...
hang on. So who does run politics and the government in this country?
I recently saw a Netflix documentary called My Name is Hank. And I think the guy you're talking about was Hank, whatever his last name.
I forget. I don't know. Whoever, anyway, the head of the Federal Reserve, the legislatures have, there was a suggestion that they become bailed out with taxpayers' money. It wasn't an instruction. Mm-hmm. And so there was debate in the legislature for about a week. And then whoever it was, I think it was Paulson, comes in there and he just tells them straight up. He tells them straight up, if you don't do this, the economy will collapse the economy, and there will be riots in the street, and there will be martial law in this country. Period.
Well, that's
just that simple.
When he says, when we get all his regulations, that means banking regulations.
Yeah, banking regulations,
it's Henry Paulson. But he went by Hank. And,
but that was a wake-up call.
Banker.
Right.
He was a banker.
No kidding. That's what the Federal Reserve is. They're private banks. All of them.
I can use. Got a phone I can use.
So anyway, up until that day, a lot of people didn't understand how this country was run. And after that day, a lot of people started to get it. Who controls the government in this country? Well, by golly, it's not the elected officials, is it? Because, we, the people, don't want to spend our money bailing out these private banks. And that's a fact. They had polls, and 60, 70% of the people did not want to, a good majority of people didn't want to do it.
So did Occupy start in New York?
Yes, on Wall Street. Wall Street, the Federal Reserve Bank and their, associated stock. What happened is they got rid of some regulations that prevented, they had two kinds of banks. These regulations mandated two kinds of banks. So one of them was some kind of bank that people go to and they have their savings and they get loans or whatever. But the Wall Street, the investment bankers who took risks in stock deals, that was a different kind of bank, and you couldn't mix them up. So they got rid of regulations. The regular banks got into the, they kind of mixed them up. So now they're taking, risk on Wall Street with people's investors, or clients' savings, whatever, and lost.
I was working with, one of the largest oil and gas companies at that time. And I was stationed in Colorado, and I remember in Denver was a crowd of Occupy.
There is a branch of the Federal Reserve in Denver.
And so, wasn't this Occupy, if I remember right, without really people sending out emails and trying to stir up shit, it was like the news reported on what was happening in New York, and then in less than 2 weeks, popping up all across the nation were occupied movements in other states.
What is our topic of discussion?
Grassroots movements.
Spontaneous populist movements. And so all of a sudden, a lot more people figured out what's really going on in our government, who really controls it. And they occupied Wall Street in New York. We don't like this.
Look at the town halls.
Yeah.
Okay. You had like everybody calling for the Betsy DeVos thing, and they still passed her anyway. Carson got confirmed today. A guy with absolutely no administrative experience at all. He's a freaking brain surgeon. Put him in the health department.
Okay. So let's go back to Occupy. What's important, I think, is how I think part of the Occupy movement across the state, people began to see that, hey, there's other people thinking like me. It's just not me.
Right. It was Occupy Wall Street, and it was because of the Federal Reserve and the bank bailout. And all of a sudden, people started realizing it may not be our elected officials, our representatives who are who are really in control here, or doing our bidding, our representation. They might be representing somebody else, right? And before that, they didn't know that. And I think it was made very, very clear, after that there was a real serious problem in our government. And that's where the Occupy movement came from. And it was just a spontaneous uprising.
And I think also out of Occupy was the ability to connect with those other states. And then all of a sudden you had a grassroots movement.
Well, social networking, yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, I think there was a society class realization at the same time. Hey, who's really in power and who's causing this?
Right.
And it was spontaneous.
Exactly. And it was disorganized. There was no centralized hierarchy. And I guess a lot of people think George Soros and there was some magazine that, sponsored a lot of stuff.
On the news, I heard nothing but bad things about it.
So there's the propaganda, the controlled media was bad-mouthing this thing. They're just a bunch of dirty hippies, socially, we don't care. And so a lot of people just went out there to their local one to see what the heck was going on, and it was average people.
Sure. Remember you were at that one rally and the plumber guy drove by?
Yeah, and I think, there was, I was reading in the news at the time, and I forget whether it was Boston or somewhere where another Occupy movement was going on at the same time. And the police were trying to arrest the people who were on a public park. And a lawyer filed an injunction, and the local judge said, America was founded upon peaceful social protest. Mm-hmm. That is public land. They have every right to be there.
Every city was different. There was no centralized organization. Every city every one of them was different.
But I thought that was interesting.
Oh,
that,
yeah. Sure.
Courts was beginning to see that, people have a right to complain about government.
Exactly. Oh, the police. And Oklahoma here, the police force is very friendly and helpful. Yeah. It was every place was different.
But as you
No.
said, there was no hierarchy and there was no central figure.
But anyway, I think that's what happened is all because of this TARP thing and who really controls the government here in this country. People started figuring it out. Okay, we're going to occupy Wall Street. We don't like this. And what I used to tell people while we were there is that you could have 10 times or 100 times as many people directly involved in going out and voting for different representatives in the system, all that. And it's not going to make a bit of difference. The only thing we're doing here is raising social, general public awareness.
At the time,
And
like
it
I
worked.
said, I was in
That
Colorado,
worked.
and I was in touch with a friend of mine who did a lot of computer programming for me back in the day and developing different software on some side projects. And he lived in Nevada, but he was originally from Iowa. And I first got to know him in Iowa when we were members of an international group called the Resource-Based Economy Network. And it was global people trying to educate people about moving away from currency to a resource-based economy, which I was really behind.
Real good idea.
But I remember talking to him, and I made the comment, it seems to me that each state has their own agenda and their own deal, and no one's really communicating with everyone else. And I said, if they could somehow connect and be more central, then you have millions of people going to Washington and protesting the corruption going on up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beauty of grassroots movement is to affect change, you have to organize the masses, because if just New York made changes because of the Occupy people in New York, that's not going to affect me in Oklahoma. That's not going to affect someone in Nevada. That's not going to affect someone in Iowa. But the beauty of Occupy was there was no hierarchy. It was just people fed up and saying, by God, we want the truth and we want to raise awareness. This isn't right.
We want to put our representatives on notice that we're paying attention. Yeah.
And so last year, actually in 2015, I got involved with the National Bernie campaign and was one of the key players in their national data team. We were responsible for every bit of data that was coming in, and we categorized it, got it entered so that the campaign could say, okay, I need to report on X, Y, and Z, and they were able to take what we did. And the beauty part of the national volunteer base, I got to know Zach Exley really well. And he was really the instigator in helping form this nationwide movement of volunteers. And I even knew, since I was in the upper management side, I got to see that even some of our data entry people were volunteers from other countries. So literally 24 hours a day, people were giving up 4 to 8 hours of their time to just sit in front of their home computer and input data. 24 hours a day. And because of the fact that I saw the names being entered in and I saw the finished product, I can tell you there were millions of people involved in the Bernie campaign. And I would say a good 70% of them came from the Occupy movement. And even though the news media didn't comment or show the pictures, I attended several key, public meetings where Bernie appeared and had his rallies and worked behind the scenes. And I saw the numbers. I also saw the numbers of people that were signing up to do phone banks, that were signing up to do canvassing, that were signing up to get out the vote. And then when they opened up the Oklahoma City office, I volunteered during that whole month and saw that, our red state, became very blue.
Grassroots movement happened during his campaign. If they hadn't had the corrupt DNC to deal with, I'm sure he'd be president today.
And I can tell you in Oklahoma, and being involved with the Democratic Party for my lifetime, I can tell you when the campaign moved to Oklahoma and you had a Tulsa and Oklahoma City and a Norman paid field organizer that came in for the Bernie campaign, we were less than 4 weeks out in the primary. And I could have told you at that day that Hillary was going to win Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I saw in less than 4 weeks the grassroots movement convince the people in this state. Never before in history, the Bernie campaign set records all the way. Not only the money being raised, but that the money was coming from individuals and not corporations. And there has never been a speaker at the Democratic National Convention that received the overwhelming applause and cheers as the night he spoke. So we've looked at Hitler, we've looked at Germany, we've looked at Occupy, we're looking at Bernie. And a friend of mine just the other day, I know you raised your hand, you want to say something, so I want to get to that. But a friend of mine who was also involved in the Oklahoma Bernie campaign said that she's depressed when she sees and hears Trump on the news because it should have been Bernie. And I said, I'm not depressed. Never before in my lifetime have I seen a losing candidate's grassroots movement stay intact 6 months after the election. Everyone from Occupy, everyone from Bernie, and everyone from all these other progressive organizations are active in staying plugged in. And when you look at those numbers, we, the individuals, have the power to change our government.
That's a real good takeaway from this, because I can tell you, because I've been doing this, I've been aware, to some degree for so long, and before the Occupy, before the TARP crisis, the more you found out about it, the more angry you were, the more depressed and frustrated. It was just a negative experience before that period of time. Nothing was happening grassroots. It was going downhill. We're dumbing down real good, right? The oppression is really working. And from that period to this one, I have seen nothing but exponential growth in this grassroots, in this awareness situation. So this should be a positive thing. Even though Bernie lost, it's okay. People are waking up to what's going on here, and there are grassroots movements.
You just got to get plugged in.
They cannot be stopped.
And also remember, most Republicans didn't want Trump to win.
That's right. That's correct. So this is a positive thing that's happening now.
Sure. Our society is changing. And I know in Oklahoma, because of the role that I played at the Oklahoma City headquarters, all these Bernie volunteers looked at me after the March 1st win and said, now what do we do?
Yeah, I was amazed by that. I mean, in Oklahoma, when Cruz and Sanders, you're talking about somebody that couldn't be in the room together.
But even Sanders got more votes than any Republican candidate in a Republican state.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He got more votes.
Hardcore Republican, yeah.
I mean, he won.
So what's happening today is a positive thing, and maybe there's no way without a central organization or a hierarchy. There's no way to co-opt a grassroots movement.
True. Well, I mean, and I know here in Oklahoma, and especially Oklahoma City area, we did some research, and Bernie kind of turned us on to the word of democratic socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And we found the Democratic Socialist of America, and we joined it and formed a chapter. And a lot of Bernie people, a lot of Occupy people are still involved with our chapter. And DSA as a whole, since the election, 2/3 of their total membership has increased.
By
Okay?
2/3.
By 2/3.
By 2/3, 66%.
You know, so
or about 150%. I guess.
you know, people look at the people that have joined the Our Revolution group. So, and look at Black Lives Matter and how that is now a viable group. You know, you have all these groups that are springing up like Occupy did, and we have the power. The key is to get plugged in to a progressive group and get active. You can't be an armchair politician. Now, I'm not a Democrat anymore, and I sure as hell will never be a Republican. But I can tell you, here in America, the voting base that can win are independents, because it's almost over 50% of independents in America have registered as independent. Problem is that 50% isn't interconnected with a viable person. But what I'm trying to say is we do have the power. The power is in the people. And if anything, False Flag is about waking you up to the truth. False Flag is to encourage you to get active locally where you are and get plugged in with the resistance, because America will go back to being a place of the people, by the people, for the people. This is False Flag. Join us again for another podcast where we expose the false flags that are out there.
Here, here. Thanks for tuning in.
Wow.
I can't even record that.
What?
Thank you for tuning into False Flag, the grassroots activism podcast where together we can change the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe.